Welcome to ECTV Live. I'm Rusty Fender. Dave DeCosmo was vacationing this week in the beautiful state of Maine. Probably had snow this past weekend. It was so cold, so we wish Dave well in one of his last vacations of this year. But we'll try and trek on here. And joining us today, Vice President of Communications for the United Way, Lackawanna and Wyoming chapters, it is Nikki Keller. How are you, Nikki? Good to see you.
Doing well, Rusty. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's good to see you here, and of course, a lot of charities in the news lately. Of course, with all the disasters from Harvey in Texas, and now with North Carolina getting more rain this week, just what they need, and the rivers have backed up, and just terrible hardship everywhere. You're of course involved with the local agencies here in multi-counties.
Yes.
But of course, the United Way going back 125 years this year. That's
right.
Amazing,
that is,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Back to the pre-Civil War.
Exactly. Nationally, that is true for the United Way. Locally, here in our community, we're coming up on our 100th anniversary, actually. 1921, we started as a community chest. There was actually a group of Kiwanians coming back from a convention on a train that thought, they were kind of inspired by what they had learned at their convention and wanted to figure out a way locally to start making some changes and supporting some of the organizations in the community that were doing good works at the time, kind of unite them into what ultimately became, as I said, Community Chest, and now the United Way of Lackawanna and Wayne counties.
Originally, a religious organization set up by a woman, a rabbi,
yes,
2 ministers,
yep,
and a priest.
And
Amazing, isn't that?
Isn't that something?
That
yeah.
really is something. A lot of things had their origins. Of course, back then it was like an entirely different era, with religion being the basis. Now you can't mention Christmas on the air, but 125 years ago it was an entirely different world. 25 years ago was an entirely different world. But it's amazing how that has come as the largest privately funded nonprofit organization on earth. So you have to have great staying power to weather all these years.
That is true. And it's interesting to us as that anniversary, pretty significant, a century of caring is rapidly approaching. It is a time to kind of reflect, kind of look back, and then look ahead and see some of the changes and challenges, that have come up. This year, for example, is we've been very fortunate. Every year we have a local business leader or someone in the community who kind of steps forward and helps run our annual campaign, brings their influence and their, knowledge and their passion to the table. And this year we actually had a really interesting story. A gentleman by the name of Alex Freed. He works for Procter & Gamble up in Wyoming County, but lives in the Clark Summit area. And he had been part of our United Way for years, ran the campaign up there at P&G, on our board, and a volunteer with us. And then, so when we tapped him to be the campaign chair, we thought we knew, kind of what we were getting in terms of someone who had a lot of knowledge and a lot of influence, and someone who ran very successful campaigns, and we wanted to hopefully have that translate for the overall campaign. And then last, I think it was February, March, he came in, he met with the staff and told us a story that, I've been with this United Way for 20 years. Most of my colleagues have been there even longer. We were stunned by the story that he told. So if I could share that with you just real quickly. But,
and by the way, Procter & Gamble, one of the largest employers at the Mahoupany facility in the region, let alone just in Wyoming County.
Exactly, right. And they're incredibly supportive of the United Way, not just this one, of course, but all of the United Ways in our region, to the tune of, almost, I think, $600,000 a year.
That's
so
incredible.
Really amazing. Employees, retirees, and corporately as well. So, but Alex shared with us that he and his family were in their native Czech Republic in 1968 and immigrated to this country as part of the Prague Spring. They actually, there was like a 24-hour period, I guess, where the borders were open. So he and his family at the time, he was about 3 years old, his parents, and he immigrated, or fled, I should say, to Paris, France, and then made their application for immigration status to the United States, and were helped by the Jewish Federation of Scranton. They had no connection to this area, other than just that help and that support. And they actually then spent, as Alex will say, went from spring in Paris to summer in Scranton.
About that.
And
what a segue.
Isn't that right? Yeah. Isn't that something? And then when they arrived here, in the time of needing to kind of learn the language, assimilate culturally, and find work and things like that, Alex attended the Day Nursery Association, which was then and is still a United Way partner agency for daycare services while his parents were working. And in the summertime, he attended the Jewish Community Center day camp. So again, also still supported, and was then and still is supported by the United Way. And so I think for us it was just a very, very eye-opening thing that how this kind of giving can come full circle. You know, that 50 years ago, a campaign was being run actually by Attorney Maury Myers here in Scranton, and those dollars that were raised helped Alex and his family come to this area, and then 50 years later, now he's in the position to be the campaign chair and kind of give back, pay it forward while giving back. And I just, you know, it was really a very tremendously inspiring story, I think, because then you kind of look at, you know, some of those kids at day nursery or maybe at the JCC camp or any one of our number of programs now, and you think, I wonder, you know, 50 years from now, one of these kids may be the one that's leading the charge. So again, as I said, we're kind of reflecting back and moving forward and looking forward as well.
Great retro story. You know, you have to wonder what life was like in the late 1800s when you made 30 cents a week as a coal miner. And still, in the initial years of the National United Way campaign, they raised like $5 billion. But that's a lot of 30 cents added up. Can you imagine? I mean, to come full circle, now you talk $1 billion that you raised within the last one day in North Carolina.
Wow, that's true.
But you know, $5 billion back then, it's like, what a whole different way of living, you know?
That's very true, and I think, you know, as we talk too about how things, as much as things stay the same, they certainly change. And I think that's one of the beauties of the United Way movement across the board, and no matter where you are in the country or around the world, whether you're talking about disasters or, you know, the everyday crises that happen locally in a community, it's that idea that when people are supporting an organization like the United Way, you know, your donation, my donation, but then you multiply that, you know, everyone at that particular work site will say, or within the community, and it really does multiply and just make a huge impact.
You're with them 20 years already.
I am.
I hate someone who can't hold a job.
I know, right?
And you were with the Girl Scouts before that.
I was.
So you have to really like a challenge, more or less, because it's a very challenging business to try and get $1 these days, which is worth $1 from folks. It is not like, you know, it's not like any other industry. This is an industry where you're purely reliant on not only the year, but the day on which people feel that they're going to give. So it must be a real big challenge to you know, undertake the Girl Scouts and then this transition into the United Way. But they're both pretty similar, aren't they?
Sure, in terms of you know, giving back, and in that case, you know, helping girls and young women, you know, prepare for success in the future, and certainly that's something that we do at United Way as well. You know, we really focus on our 3 pillars, and we can hit on all of that as we talk here today, but our focus is really on education, financial stability, and health, which, you know, those are the key things, the key things that everyone needs for a successful future, as it were. But I think going back to what you said about challenges, it's an interesting time, and even just in those couple decades, how things have changed, just in terms, I think, really of looking at it more from an opportunity standpoint. You know, donors are much more sophisticated now than they were, I think, because there's, maybe not than they were, but the information that's readily available. You know, people really want to make an informed decision before they make a contribution.
And the world is at your fingertips on your phone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, the opportunity to share stories like this, you know, things like that, certainly with social media, we have that ability. You know, even 20 years ago, we didn't have a website, let alone, you know, this kind of thing now where we can communicate on a daily basis with donors. So I think that is very important, and it helps us to kind of tell our story a little bit more. And I think all organizations that are you know, involved in giving back and in improving the community in any way, really need to harness that, you know, really need to take advantage of the opportunity that's presented by that constant flow of information, so that we can really kind of put the message out there, and then people can make an informed choice as to whether this is something they want to support or not.
You were at the Girl Scouts. What do you think about this just going Scouts and no Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts? Are we in some type of like revival Neanderthal movement to get things changed? It's like, you know, they did the same thing with the Miss America pageant, and it backfired royally. You know, Gretchen Carlson came in and said, this is terrible, this is outrageous. Nonetheless, as I told a lot of folks, yet nonetheless, 30 years ago, she paraded in a bikini in front of the judges and thought it was great when she won, Gretchen Carlson, you know, from CNN, who's the former anchor who's now in charge of the pageant. And she just thought it's just this heinous display of sexuality, and it's disgusting, and it's immoral, and it's terrible. And, you know, they had the lowest ratings
Right.
of any pageant, not just Miss America, but Miss Universe, Miss whatever, Miss in the history of the 50 or 60-year history of the. So what does tell folks? Are we knee-jerk reacting into all this nonsense? It's just unbelievable. They did away with the swimsuits contest, and they think they were beaten out by a show on the history of the Bolt on PBS. What does that tell you?
Sometimes maybe the flow of information, maybe there's too much information, you know? I guess when people are making their own choices.
Too much
I'm not
information.
sure. Yeah.
Now, the United Way, you're covering Wyoming and Lackawanna counties.
Wayne and Lackawanna.
Wayne and Lackawanna counties. And this year you have a special message here for your campaign, which is already underway, correct,
It is.
Nikki?
It is, yep. We actually kicked off earlier in September with our Day of Caring. 24 years we've been doing that, and that's a really neat event where we've just mobilized hundreds of volunteers in the community who, instead of going to work that day, they kind of go to work for United Way. So we have them working with a number of different partner agencies. I think this year they did almost 50 different projects. And the value of that over the last 24 years, the agencies have kind of come together with us and put a value of about $3 million on that, just in terms of projects and things that they maybe didn't have an opportunity to do, a lot of spruce up, cleanup, painting, landscaping, that kind of thing. But then there's also, we've had some demolition, the old demo day kind of thing, gone on, certainly some construction. We had one of our construction companies building some handicap accessible ramps this year, and then some client visitation and spending some time with some of the seniors and some of the preschoolers and things like that. So it really is a nice across the board way for individuals who are current and prospective donors, current and prospective volunteers to kind of see firsthand the work that's going on, as opposed to just seeing it in a brochure or watching a video, but actually kind of rolling up their sleeves and making a difference for the day.
Let's hit this a couple of times. First of all, how can folks get in touch to donate? And we'll do this either your web address or what have you right now. We'll do it again at the end of the show. How can they get in touch with?
We have a brand new website we just launched last year. Again, going back to that, need to really have as much information out there as we can for folks.
It's up to you to disseminate that information.
It is. That's true. That's why we appreciate this here.
That's right.
But our website is uwlc.net. And that really is the best way, again, where people can not only learn about our organization, but there are ways then where they can certainly, donate, but also look for ways that they can volunteer and things like that. We are tremendously grateful and very fortunate in this community to have a number of workplace campaigns. That is something I think that United Way is kind of known for. And that is, right now, we're really in the crux of that, where work sites and workplace companies will allow United Way to come in, speak to the employees, and then through payroll deduction, where it's maybe $1 or $2 a week out of the paycheck. It's a little easier to manage than just say writing a check for $50 or $100 or whatever at one time. Try to make it as painless as possible. And again, going back to that that's how the impact is made. When you can multiply the generosity of people that way, for a couple dollars a week, it really adds up and really makes a big difference. So that's another factor that if we have a number of individual donors as well and the workplace donors, so it's that's kind of how it works.
I learned about the United Way actually through what you just said. Just a flashback here. My first real job after college in broadcast engineering was at WBRE television, Channel 20 in Wilkes-Barre. And David Baltimore, the family owner at the time, he was he used to get the award for the Wyoming Valley campaign every year. And United Way at that time, it's 1979, my first job in broadcasting, and they came in and talked about this. I'm thinking, oh, this is amazing. This is the first time like a charity, because you think about the Salvation Army and things like that, organizations like that, has ever come in and made this group appeal in the auditorium down on South Franklin Street in Wilkes-Barre. And it was a payroll deduction for as long as we were there. It was such a really good thing because David, of course, Baltimore, reaped the benefits of getting the award every year. And with back in those days, now a television station consists of about 3 full-time employees and a computer. Back then, we had like a staff of 100 and some people back, you're talking 40 years ago already. And it was amazing that he had all the juggernauts of industry with him on that case. So it's like the United Way was like a big industry challenge, more than the Red Kettle campaign of the Salvation Army. I think that's what sets everything apart here. This is much more grander scale. Don't you agree?
I think so. And again, that's kind of, like I said, what really sets it apart is on that end of things where we have kind of really unparalleled access, I think, to individuals in the community who would be willing to give, and with that convenience of payroll deduction. And then on the other side of that too, we have our Community Impact Fund distribution process, which is, formerly known as allocations, but it's still the same concept where you have community volunteers who themselves are donors that help to make the decision as to where the dollars are going, what programs are getting funding, and it's just a nice cross section of the community. It's not, any one or two people, but I think right now currently we have about 60 to 70 volunteers every year that get together, and again, kind of looking at those pillars, the education, financial stability, and health. So making sure that the programs are running efficiently, effectively, and that they're meeting, stated goals and objectives within each of those areas. So they have some pretty tough funding decisions to make. But I think that sort of transparency is really important and does set the United Way apart. We were actually fortunate to just receive notification through Charity Navigator, which is one of the largest charity watchdogs and watch groups in the country, and we have received their highest rating for 7 straight years. So that puts us, I guess, in the letter we received from them, we were kind of surprised by it, but pleasantly so, that puts us in pretty extraordinary company in terms of only about 5% of the charities nationwide achieve that level of transparency.
Good bottom line for fundraising organizations.
It is. It really is. And it's all about transparency, accountability, and just, basically that we are careful stewards of the resources that are entrusted to us. So, we're proud of that, but it all goes back to those volunteers that just are so careful in terms of where the investments are being made. Whether it's with partner agencies, some of our own programs that we're running in the Wayne County area, we work with grant recipient organizations up there. So we're, kind of just have a lot of moving parts, but we're trying to do it as efficiently and effectively as we can.
We're speaking with Nikki Keller, Vice President of Communications for the United Way of Lackawanna and Wayne counties. In the 20 years you've been there, you must have seen a lot of changes. And first of all, is the informational change. 1998, the internet was just taking off back then. Mm-hmm. People who were watching TV commercials didn't know what the www dot whatever stood for back then.
That's exactly
so
true.
1998, you're thinking now of just this incredible connected world where you can, you figure out your income tax on your telephone in a second. But back then, it was a whole different animal to raise old school funds the old school way.
That's true. That's true, and it's, like anything else, and particularly in our community, I think we try to strike a balance with that, in terms of encouraging online donations and online pledging with the people who still enjoy getting a phone call, still, respond to filling out a piece of paper and putting it in the mail and that kind of thing. So we definitely try to do it that way. But I think one of our newest programs is a great illustration of that. Within the health area, we've been working with a number of different partners, including the University of Scranton and Lackawanna College and some different groups there, to create telehealth programs. So we have 2 of those actually. One is called TIPS, which is the Telehealth Intervention Program for Seniors, and that one is basically centered right now in the senior centers in our area. So we've got about 6 of those, and we see anywhere from 300 to 400 seniors a week. And what we're doing in that program is monitoring vitals. So we're monitoring, non-invasive kind of FDA-approved devices, but we're looking at
that's a great idea.
Pulse ox, blood pressure, weight,
sure.
Things like that.
Vital signs.
And all of that is then remotely transmitted to a nurse who's reviewing it and can get in touch with that senior, or if there's some kind of an issue. We have another program very similar, but it's called ROAM, the Remote Older Adult Monitoring Program, and that's just more in our rural areas or for people that aren't necessarily in a senior center.
Which benefits Wayne County.
Wayne County for sure, and also Lackawanna County Area Agency on Aging. We're working with them as well. So it's a really great program, and we've actually had a couple instances where it has honestly saved lives, where someone was found to have a brain bleed in one instance
And
that
would not have
didn't know.
shown up.
Exactly. And the other one had a heart blockage, but it's that kind of thing, just in between doctor visits, so it's really not replacing your traditional medical care that you receive when you go to the doctor, but it's in between, just that in between time to kind of get a baseline reading on those vitals, monitor those things, and then instantly if there's some kind of a problem, if reading is too high or too low, or something like that. But again, 20 years ago, that's unheard of. So that's the kind of thing that I think is.
I'm in the engineering business 47 years, mainly aerospace engineering, but it blows me away every day to think of the technology. I have to read up on this stuff just to keep up with it. And I know the nuts and bolts of this, and I have to read it. People in the other generations, that's why you're still going to get a lot of funding the old school way from the old school folks, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's brilliant that you hooked up with the colleges in this area.
Yes.
Look at the mall at Steamtown, the marketplace at Steamtown, between Keystone and LCC and Lackawanna College. Now they have all these remote campuses, and let's face it, they have the quantity of students and the quantity and the quality of the education that pair with that. That's who you want to get with. And who would think that 15 years ago that a college would be expanding to different counties? But this is part of the informational flow. And now you have to have a satellite branch of your college in towns to be competitive anymore.
Sure.
That's a great deal to get a charity and then an educational institution. I think that's brilliant, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
Good PR.
Well, it is, and it helps us tremendously because, certainly it helps us in terms from a volunteer perspective, but also just that, looking at what the students bring into the table in terms of, their energy, their enthusiasm, and their knowledge on some of these things that I think is tremendously, tremendously helpful. So, even with our telehealth programs, I think one of the things, as high tech as it is, it's also a lot of relationship based. The volunteers, the students are going in, they're talking to the seniors. Oh, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Based.
They can kind of see if maybe somebody seems a little off that day. They're remembering, the conversation maybe they had last week.
Great.
Oh, I heard the grandkids were coming in.
Huh?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really, again, it's just that balancing act between the high tech and the, high touch, as it were, but the really taking advantage of the personal relationship and the personal communication, as well as some of the high-tech things that we have available to us now. So
I'm sure you're very well budgeted. Where does most of your funding go?
Oh, well,
In the Bi-County area?
Oh, sure. It's
elderly?
It's really split, I have to say, between those three areas. Health does get the most
health.
by a little bit.
Health by a little bit.
Just by a little bit. Probably, I think it's, I'm better at words than numbers, but I think it's about 36%.
It's the same deal. They're all interconnected, though.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. And then I think our education would be the next, and then our financial stability. But education is huge in our.
How about that?
For us as well, we've done a lot of work with looking into helping prepare kids for school, making sure that they're ready when they get there, and we've done. For years, that's kind of been the focus. Now we're looking a little deeper into making sure that as kids, once they enter school, then we're working on the supports that surround them. So, while they're in school, that's great, but we want to make sure, do they have enough to eat? Do they have somewhere to sleep? Are they, some of those things that there's barriers that surround their education that you don't think of. If Susie is sitting there with a toothache, she's not really learning. She's not paying attention. She's not taking in the lesson because she's thinking about how much her tooth hurts. So we're trying to address a variety of different things kind of surrounding the whole child. One of our big focus areas is in making sure that kids are reading proficient by the time they reach third grade. We say up until that point, kids are learning to read, but from that point forward, they're reading to learn. So they really need to be hitting those benchmarks at the right age. So we're putting a lot of focus on bringing groups together, which is something I think United Way has traditionally been very good at in terms of, just kind of the collaboration and the network, and, we're united for a reason. So yeah. I think that's really the key in bringing groups together. We've created a collaboration called Transforming Children's Futures, and it's looking at all of those things. Attendance awareness, you probably see the billboards around town, every student, every day. That's part of our initiative, is just making sure that, kids are in school and are learning. And elementary school, it's not so much about truancy as it is, again, going back to the other things. Is there a transportation issue, a health issue, that kind of thing.
It's not so much the billboards, it's the underlying banner on television, all the campaigns, whether whether it's a run, a charity race, and when you see the United Way logo there along with television stations and the Scranton Times, that's when you know you made it. When you get that type of publicity, because you can't buy that type of publicity. But you must, with all the local charities, with all the national charities out there, you must brainstorm a lot on how to keep things fresh and different. That must be the challenging part of the challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're always trying to do, and that's where having so many different voices kind of coming in, from a donor side, from a volunteer side, is being open to those sorts of things. When we're working with the school districts, we'll say, what do you need? What are you seeing? You're the experts. You're the ones that know what's happening. Same with our senior centers, or that kind of thing. You're the ones on the ground. You're on the front line, so you know what the need is. But how can we address it? And not just the root cause, or not just the immediate need, but the root cause. So how can we fix it moving forward? So we're not just continuing to throw, resources at a problem, but let's see if we can actually kind of fix it.
Anything new you want to tell us? This is your pitch now for the 2018-2019 campaign. Anything you want to tell us about the campaign now?
Our focus is truly, we say we're fighting for the community, and I think that's really the thing, that when we kind of bring everybody together to say we're fighting for the education, financial stability, and health of our community. It doesn't matter socioeconomic status, race, gender, none of that matters. We all need a good education. We all need enough income to support ourselves and our families through retirement, and without good physical and mental health and well-being, then none of that matters. So the key is really, the more people that we can get involved, the more people that we can bring to the table, we can start addressing some of these issues. And I would just encourage people to visit our website, connect with us in any way you can. Of course, we're on social media. We do e-newsletters, we do, any way that we possibly can to connect with people. But I think if people learn more, they give us a chance. There's a lot of ways to get involved beyond just a pledge card, though we certainly appreciate that as well. But there are just so many volunteer opportunities and ways to make a difference in the community, and what a great community we live in.
I think with 125 years nationally and 100 years locally, I think the viability of your part in the community will never be questioned. So that's a really good thing. Good luck with the campaign. Again, 2018-2019 campaign. One more time, the website, Nikki?
It's uwlc.net.
The United Way of Lackawanna and Wayne Counties. Nikki Keller, Vice President of Communications, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Good to see you, always a pleasure. Mark McGlory, thanks for your technical expertise as always. David will be back next week. Until then, Rusty Fender here on ECTV Live. Thank you so much for joining us.